Okay, so today we're just going to go over a basic intro on hands and give you a couple of pointers. This isn't a tutorial on how to draw a specific hand. It's basically on fundamentals and a few things that you should know about drawing the hand. And then you can take it from there and practice. Okay, so this is like a starting point. This is for information. So I'm going to write a couple things down. Notes on hands. Okay, so what we're doing is hands. And one of the first things I want to point out is the index finger. So this finger right here, we're just going to call it index. Okay, so that equals, and let me zoom out real fast so we can see this a little bit clearer. This equals the length of the back of your hand. In fact, let me take off my watch so I can show you on camera. So while we're drawing, we want to figure out what the lengths are proportional wise. So this is all proportional. So this is going to be based on either your hand or what you draw. So when we do this, if I take this finger, this index finger, and I'm going from the knuckle to the tip, I'm going to apply it to here, and you're going to see from the knuckle to the back of the wrist where it bends, that is going to be the length of the back side of my hand. So the index finger equals the length of the back of the hand. Okay, so write that down. The second thing we're talking about is your middle finger. Your middle finger, which is longer, is going to equal the distance between the base of the finger and your base of your palm. So that's relatively going to be around the same size. So right here and here are relatively going to be the same. So one thing to point out is your palm is longer than the back of your hand. And part of that's just the way it's constructed. From the palm side, you're going to see this area right here. Okay, well, that area is actually the front of the web, which is down here. So when you're looking at your palm, you don't necessarily see all the way to the web. You mainly see right around here. So that's why the back of the hand visually appears to be a little bit shorter than the palm, because the bottom of your web, that is the top of your palm. Okay, so that's one little thing to look at. So we're going to go middle finger and that's going to equal the length of the palm. All right, so those are a few of our techniques, tips that we're going to look at right now. So now we're going to get into drawing the base of the hand, and this is going to be really, really simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this curve. Okay, and that curve is representational of your knuckles on the back of your hand. Make this a little bit darker so we can see it. Okay, and then if you look at the back of your palm, it is square shaped but not quite. And the pinky side of the palm is a little bit higher up than the thumb side of the palm, and you can see that slight angle that you're going to see. So when I start this off, I basically try to get a square shape. And then once I get that square shape, I'm going to come in and I'm going to add that little bit of a curve here. And on this one, I'm going to extend it a little bit farther down, and I'm going to add that curve here. So we're basically having that same angle that we see on the hand naturally. The next part, I'm going to add my wrist. Now, the wrist spreads out, and it really depends on the type of arm you have. A female arm, it's going to be pretty straight. It will eventually expand out. On a male's arm that's going to be wider or have more muscular, it's going to angle out more. Okay, so we're just going to keep that nice little angle. The other thing we have is we have this little radial bone right here that allows our wrists to do this. I want to add that in, and that's going to be right in here into that palm. And I'll round it out a bit. Okay, so this is the foundation for our hand. Now, we have 4 fingers and they're spread out. So what I want to do is I want to divide this into 4 parts, and I'm not too concerned about how accurate I am, because I can make adjustments, but I'm just going to try to spread these out equally, and those are going to represent my knuckles. So what we have to start talking about is we have to start talking about this curve, okay? Because this curve is going to be repeated a couple of times, and it's going to become more of a curve the farther away we move from the base of the hand. So the first thing I want to do is establish the length of my fingers. Well, I know that the middle finger is my longest finger. My ring finger is my second longest finger, and my index finger, that is going to be my third, and then of course the pinky is going to be the smallest. Well, we've already established in our notes that the length of our index finger is the same as the back of our hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that measurement. I'm just going to draw a line. I'm going to have this line coming out at an angle, and I want to see that it's going to match up. So that's pretty good right there. It might be a little bit long, so I'm going to cut it off right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a basic shape that's going to taper as it gets to the end of the finger. That means it's going to narrow down. So it's going to taper, it's going to narrow down slightly. And what I know is I have this dramatic curve that's going to happen right here. Okay, and if I spread it out, that curve's still going to happen. So with my fingers spread out, I have this angle here that I can see. So I know if I put this angle in, that's going to be about where my middle finger is. And then I can see, okay, it's going to be slightly less angle. So I'm going to come out here. I'm going to put a line in for that finger. And then I know it's fairly dramatic drop off again. And I'm going to say this is for my pinky finger. So what I have now is I have this curve that I can diagram. And that curve is going to also come in at every knuckle. So when we look at our knuckles, we see again that curve one more time. And then here we're going to see it again happen. And it gets a little bit more dramatic the farther we go up. So now that I have this, I want to draw in my shapes for my fingers. I want to keep them fairly consistent. The pinky slightly thinner, but not too much and not noticeable here. And I'm just going to bring these fingers down. And again, this is where you make your adjustments. So I'm going to make my first adjustment right here. And right now it doesn't look like a very good hand, but that's not the point. The point is, let's get everything where it's supposed to be. Now, if I look at my knuckles and I want to continue that curve, I'm going to have another curve here. And then I can just simply look at my hand and I'm looking at the relationship of the knuckle to the end of the finger, knuckle to the end of the finger, knuckle to the end of the finger, right? And then from here I'm looking from the base to here, from the base to here. and I want to maintain that curve so you guys can see that curve that's happening right here, and again you can see that curve that's happening here. Okay, so when we do this, we want to see these curves happening, and we're just going to keep those in mind while we're drawing. The next part is our thumb. Now, when we do thumbs, I like to chop off parts. I don't have, let me get a piece of paper here. So when I'm talking about chopping off parts, I'm going to chop off part of my thumb. And that could be up here too, it doesn't really matter. And what I want to see is what's that shape that's being formed between here and here. And as I presented, I call it kind of like a little volcano. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to draw that volcano, and I'm going to have it come down into the hand. And again, it's coming from that palm. Then once I have that, okay, so this is that section we drew right here. Then I can say, what is this shape? So if I take off that part of my thumb, I want to see what is that shape. And it kind of looks like a cylinder, even though our hands are not a cylinder. So I'm going to put that in. And at this point, I can decide, do I want to have my thumb bent or do I want to have it straight? I think I'm going to go with it bent. And when it comes bent, you're going to notice that your thumb pad's going to come into that cylinder. So when you're drawing it, going to put that knuckle in. It's going to come right in here. Okay, so it's going to have that bit of that overlapping. So that's going to be that thumb part, and it's going to be that overlapping part right here. So now we have our hand laid out, and what we're really looking for is proportions and scale. Once I have this down, then I can go through and I can start smoothing a few things out. So I can look at my pinky in particular, and this is what's going to happen. You guys are going to look at your fingers because you have them, right? And you're going to find that the hands that you tend to draw are going to closely resemble your hands. And if you're a guy and you're drawing a female hand, the secret is make the fingers a little bit thinner. Okay, and again, if you're drawing just generic hands, we want to go by genetic traits and markers. So typically a female's hand is going to be smaller. Fingers are going to be slightly thinner, where men's hands going to be a little bit wider, and our fingers are going to be a little bit thicker. Even if we have long fingers, they're going to be a little bit thicker than your average female. Now, hands are just like anything else. They're unique to the person. This is, we're talking generic. So when I start coming in now, I can start, rounding out these shapes, and you're going to see how it's going to start taking the look of a hand, and the fingers are going to start looking more like fingers, right? And again, you can make adjustments at this point. So if you see something that feels like it's, a little too long, too short, too wide, you can start, fleshing that out or making your adjustments. Now here's the thing a lot of people forget, the web. Now when you notice your hand, the bone structure of your hand actually goes farther inside, so you can see it right here. And you have the web and you get that little shadow. So right in here, you just have to put the little webbing in, and you're going to start seeing that this is going to resemble more and more of a hand. Let me sharpen my pencil real fast. And then I can start coming through and adding all these different parts. And again, I'm not going to get into too much detail. Little folds. And then you start seeing that hand. Okay, so if you keep working on this, you'll start seeing it develop. You can indicate your knuckles. Some are going to be more pronounced than others. Okay, and then you're going to start seeing the back of the hand. And this is when you just start looking and really start seeing, okay, what are some of the things in the back of my hand? And again, if I'm drawing a female's hand, I'm going to leave a lot of this stuff out, right? Because I want it to be nice and smooth. So this is going to be my hand. I can start indicating, okay, this is where my knuckles are going to be. Again, we start getting that hand. So you can see where this is going. Usually my construction lines are a lot lighter, and then I'll erase my construction lines. One thing to remember when you're drawing, everyone wants to go directly to the finished product like a fully rendered hand. It doesn't really work that way, especially when you start changing grips and doing different things with the hand. You really need to build it. And then once you build your hand, then you can start erasing your construction lines and you can start adding your values. So one thing we're going to talk about right now is the misconception of the finger. A lot of people think the finger as a tube. And reality is it is basically 3 cubes, rectangular cubes. It looks round, but you have a flat top. You have a fairly flat side on this one. And then what's round is the padding on your fingers. And that's what really gives it that look. So you can see the padding, how the padding is round. And that's usually what people see as far as thinking a finger as a cylinder. So when we want to look at a finger, and I can just start off here with a knuckle, and then I'm going to just bring this base out, come here, and I'm just going to draw this finger out, okay? So here's 1, 2, 3. Your fingers have 3 parts. However, when you're drawing, especially from the side, you're going to see this 4th thing. And this 4th part is really just the pad on your palm. But when you're drawing it, you're going to see it. So a lot of people think like this finger gets super long, when the reality is you're seeing the palm, but you're seeing it at an angle. So this 4th part that you're going to see coming in right here, that's not actually part of the finger, that is part of the hand. And then usually you'll get that skin fold here, and then the back of the hand's going to be up here. So I want to break this down so you guys can see this. So when I'm drawing, and let me take this here. This is the top of the finger. This is the side of the finger. I'm going to put the little pad in for you guys to see. Put the pad in for you to see. Put the pad in for you to see. And I started this one a little too far off. And what you're seeing is the planes, and this should be a little bit longer. You're seeing the planes of the finger. And this is the top plane where the fingernail bed's going to sit on. And then this is the side of your finger, and this is where you're going to get your pad. Now, the reason you want to understand these planes is because light's going to be up here. Okay, so I'm going to start. There's your knuckle. Hopefully I spelled knuckle correctly. This is going to be the top. This is going to be the side. Okay, and then this part right here is the palm. Okay, so that's that palm. I'll put palm pad so you guys can see that. And when light is coming down, so this is our light. Light's coming from above, so this side is going to be in shadow, and the top of your finger is going to be lit. I'm not going to get into core shadows and midtones. I just want to get into the structure. So when it comes to shading three-dimensional objects with light, you need to learn what a core shadow is, what midtones are as you go towards your highlights or your light source. I just want to break down the plane because it makes it easier to understand and draw when you're shading in a hand. So if you don't understand this, when it comes to actually shading and rendering the hand, it's going to be much, much harder. So that is our basic overview of a hand, right? Back of a hand, proportions, coming from the sides. So when we look at our hand, we have one plane, a second plane, a third plane, and then the fourth plane is the bottom. And that's really the plane that's rounded, and that's what really gives us our rounded finger. The other thing, our fingers taper up, and one of the big things that people do, and this is one of the biggest mistakes people do, when they draw a finger, they do this. And they draw these fingers with these little fire tips. I call them fire tips. Right? Excuse my handwriting. You don't want this. So what you can do is just go inside, just cut that angle off, add around here. This is where the nail bed's going to sit on, and that'll help you get rid of those fire tips. So those fire tips you don't want. Okay, so you don't want those. So that's one quick tip. Let's go into drawing the hand from the side. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to be showing you guys this. One thing to notice is this is a curve, but a lot of times when we draw this, we're going to get a point. So I'm just going to draw the back of the wrist, and I'm going to draw the back of the hand, and you're going to see that point is going to be there. That's fine. I don't care. I'm going to emphasize this point later on so you guys can see it. And then what you do is you add that curve in. But what you really want to do is you really want to get your angles first that you're drawing, and then you worry about the other stuff. Okay, so if this to here, let's say to right here, is the back of my hand. So we're talking from here to here. That means my finger is going to be the same length. So if I'm doing, let's say this, that means this length needs to be the same. So you can easily do this. Just measure and measure and say, okay, that's going to be the end of my finger right there, so that these lengths are going to be equal. So this length and this length are going to be equal, because remember, that's the back of the hand and that's going to be your finger. I can then come in, I can draw my shapes. And again, you want to eyeball it. You want to keep your finger proportional, so you don't want too skinny of a finger. You don't want too fat of a finger. You really got to look and see, okay, what it is that you're drawing. Um, the other part, and I skipped this part, so I'm going to go back to it. I want to chop off this finger, and this is what's really going to help you with this. So I'm going to chop this off, and then I have this angle, but then I want to chop off this too. So when I come in here, I'm going to draw that angle, and then I'm going to draw this, and I'm going to bring it up. Okay, and basically what I want to do is I'm going to create, and I probably went a little bit too far over, excuse me. So I'm going to have this come down. I'm going to break it here and then have it come in here. So there's my shape. Okay. And this is where my finger's going to come. This is where my thumb's going to come. And again, I'm going to draw that shape. And that is for me doing this. Okay. And if I have that knuckle coming straight out, I'm going to draw this thimble shape. This is where the knuckle's going to come in. That's going to be for my thumb, and you can see where this is already starting to take place. And then that finger's probably a little bit too fat, so I'm going to be tapering it down. Now, once I have this, I got to remember that I have the palm part. So I'm going to have that palm part, and then I'm going to come in. I'm going to extend this out just a little bit further. When you're drawing something this small, you know, even an eighth of an inch can create a huge difference. Here's my knuckle. I'm going to round that out. Okay. And that's going to be the main shape of my finger. And then again, this part is going to be the palm. Now the other thing is, when you're drawing a hand from any angle, so I don't care if you're drawing it from this angle or you're drawing it from this angle, you only want to draw the fingers or the parts of the hand that are facing you, and you want to cut everything else off like it doesn't exist. So when I draw, I want to pretend those don't exist, and I just want to get this stuff down. Now, once I have these shapes down, then I can come in and look. So if I'm here, I can see, okay, I'm going to do this, right? So I have this angle, and I know that my finger's coming right here at this point. So I know my finger's coming here, and I know I have this angle that I can draw, which is about here, maybe a little bit less than that. So I know this finger is coming to here. And again, I want to keep my proportions the same. I'm going to round this out. And I know it's coming right in there. So that's what I'm looking at, is it's coming from there, and then it's coming right underneath where this palm is. And then the thing you don't see is you see a little bit of the palm right here. Okay. Now, the next part is I have my other two fingers. Now, when I do this, okay, I'm not seeing all of my pinky. I'm only seeing part of it. And I'm seeing where this is coming from my other finger. So if I come here and draw this in, I'm going to indicate my pinky finger that fold, and it's going to come right in here. So I have my finger, I have this, and then I have it coming into here. Okay. So when you're drawing, and I think this finger could have been slightly longer, but that's fine. I'm just going to leave it like this for the tutorial. Now this is where you want to know where all your parts are. And so when I'm drawing my thumb, I can start putting in those parts. I know that if my light is up here, it's going to cast a shadow down. And I know that this part of the finger is going to be in shadow. I also know that these are going to be completely in shadow. And if I look at this hand, this finger is going to cast a shadow here. And then, again, these planes which are not facing the light are going to be in shadow. And that's how you really start drawing your hand and getting it to look like a hand. And then you can start adding in the folds of the skin. And this is where I come in and I start adding some of the details. And this is also where you would start erasing some of the parts. And then adding in some of your shadows. And then this is really what's going to, give your hand that depth and that volume. So I'm just going to indicate this just a little bit so you guys can see it. And this isn't meant, to look nice right now. This is basically so you can start seeing like where all your shadows go, the different tissues and muscles that are underneath. I'm not going to try to be doing all like the wrinkles and folds. But you want to see like where is the light hitting, where are my shadows going to be, where are my darker shadows going to be, where the core shadows are going to be. And then you can just start drawing these elements out and really giving this hand some volume. And making it look more and more like a hand. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it at here, just so you guys can see it. So, really quick, know your proportions. Use your hand as a model. Look for things that don't appear right. So if you get like the little fire finger again, you have your finger, you have your model. You know your finger doesn't come into a sharp like flame point, and it's really easy to fix. You just go inside. You always want to make sure that your pinky's your smallest finger, your middle finger's your biggest finger. Between your index and ring finger, your ring finger's longer, but when you're drawing it, especially when you're having angles, it's not always going to be noticeable. So when you're drawing your hand, and let's say you're drawing it at an angle like this, well, look and see what are the fingers facing you. It's the thumb, and it's going to be your index finger. The second finger you're going to see the most of is going to be your middle finger. And one way to help you out is see this little mountain right here that you can poke a hole through. You see where the light's coming in the paper? Draw that triangle. Draw that triangle, and that'll help you lay out the rest of your hand. Look and see where this finger is merging with that one. Draw that angle in. That'll give you the end point, and then that'll help you find the rest of your angles. Once you have these two fingers drawn in, then you can see what this relationship of your other two fingers are to it, and you can just start laying in your shape. And again, I don't put in the wrinkles, I put in the angles. Once I have the angles, then I go through and I start carving in and adding all these little divots. But the first thing I want is I just want the angle, and the angle. Okay, if you start jumping to details, it's probably not going to come out right. Once I have the entire hand laid out, I'm going to look and see how do some of my tissues react to light. So you know that this tissue is sticking out because you can see the shadow being casted. And then again, you can see that this is round. And then you can see how the folds are interacting with light. And you can see where your darkest shadows are versus your lighter shadows versus those really dark shadows underneath. And then you can also see some of the muscular features of your thumb and other parts. And then really just start adding your values according to your light, and you're going to start seeing your hands look better and better. I think the primary thing that everyone needs to understand, though, is start construction. First, understand how your hand is built and constructed. Understand how the finger is, that it has 4 planes. Understand proportions in laying things out. Chop off fingers, right? It sounds bad, but it's not bad. Chop off the finger, look at the shape that you're left with. So if I'm drawing something like this, I want that shape right here and here. You draw that shape, that's going to help you with the rest of your hand. And then the other thing, just remember, fingers taper, right? So your fingers taper. And what that means is, they go from their original width and they get thinner, but it's not dramatic. But you can definitely look at your finger and say, okay, it tapers right when it gets to here. It's going to get dramatically thinner. So keep that in mind when you're drawing. So that's it for about the notes. I'll post these and I'll share them. So I'm going to scan some of the ones I did earlier. I'll probably do a typed version of this because my handwriting is not the best. But this is our hand tutorial. This is just to get you started off drawing hands. My advice, copy other drawings of hands. Copy demonstrations that have breakdowns of the plane, meaning you're not copying a fully rendered hand. You're copying the breakdown, the parts of the hand. And then practice. So that's the best way that you're going to get at drawing hands. What you need to avoid is trying to go directly to a rendered hand. Once you start trying to go to a rendered hand, you're never ever going to get it right, even if you practice and practice and practice. Because if you don't understand the structure, you're never going to be able to accurately draw something. And that goes for anything. It doesn't matter what you're drawing. If you don't understand the structure, you're not going to be able to draw. So that's it for today. Hope you learned something. If you want to draw hands, go out and practice. It's repetition. Repetition is what's really going to help you. and then understanding the structure of what you're drawing. So till next time, this is Mr. Aguilar.